I was never one to ask for much, but when I decided I wanted to start my own business, I knew I'd need a little help. A small loan. Nothing too big, just enough to get me going. I had the plan in my head, the drive in my chest, and the belief that I could make it work. But what I didn't anticipate was the way my family would react. It was an ordinary Sunday evening, the kind of quiet that comes when everyone gathers around the dinner table. My father sat at the head, a place of authority, as always. My brothers sat beside him, their faces set in that familiar expression of indifference. And my mother, she was quiet as ever, lost in her thoughts, probably wondering what the weather would be like next week or what to make for dinner tomorrow. But me, I was thinking about the future. My future. So, I've been thinking, I began, my voice trembling slightly as I looked around the table. I want to start a business. I've got a solid plan, and I'm ready to make it happen. But I need a little help, just a loan to get started. My father's laugh broke the silence, sharp and dismissive. I couldn't even begin to explain how it made me feel, how it felt like an entire wall was being built between me and everyone else in that room. His face twisted into a grin, the kind that made me want to shrink into the chair. That's not what girls do, he said, shaking his head as if I'd just suggested something utterly ridiculous. I looked at my brothers, hoping for some support, but instead, they shared a look with each other, their faces agreeing with my father. My heart sank. They didn't even have to say a word. Their silence said everything. No one believed in me. I turned to my mother, my eyes pleading, but she just stared at her plate, her fork moving in slow, deliberate motions. I could feel the weight of her indifference, like she was too tired to care, or perhaps just too afraid to speak up. The room felt suffocating. I could almost hear the words hanging in the air. This is not your place. This is not for you. I could feel their judgment, their disbelief, and it stung. But something else began to build inside me. It wasn't anger, not at first. It was something sharper, something more dangerous. Determination. I couldn't stay in that room. I couldn't stand to hear their voices telling me I wasn't capable. So, I stood up, excused myself, and walked away. The words still echoed in my mind. Girls don't do this. But as I walked out that door, I knew something for certain. I wasn't just any girl, and I would make them see. I left the house that night with nothing but the sting of their words and a fire ignited in my chest. It was the kind of fire that doesn't die, it only grows hotter. My family's rejection, their dismissal of my dreams, only made me more determined. They thought they could squash me with a few words. They thought I'd back down, but they were wrong. I remember walking down the street that night, the cool air biting at my skin, the streetlights flickering above like lonely sentinels. My footsteps echoed in the empty streets, and all I could hear was the sound of my own. Heartbeat, each thud louder than the last. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't have a clear path ahead of me, but I knew I had to keep moving, keep pushing forward. So, I started small. I found odd jobs wherever I could, anything that would give me a bit of cash to start with. I learned what I could, listened to anyone willing to teach me, and gradually, the pieces of my dreams started to take shape. It wasn't glamorous. I wasn't surrounded by success and wealth. It was late nights and early mornings, working harder than I ever had in my life. Every penny I earned went straight into my business. Every ounce of energy went into learning the ins and outs of running a company. I spent hours in libraries, reading everything I could about business, marketing, and sales. I learned to be resourceful, to make something out of nothing. And there were days when I doubted myself, days when the weight of my ambition felt too heavy. But those moments were brief. Every time I stumbled, I thought of that night, of their laughter, their coldness, and their refusal to believe in me, and it fueled me. I remember the first real breakthrough. A small client, nothing big, but enough to prove to myself that I could do it. The satisfaction of seeing my hard work pay off was intoxicating. It was validation. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't just a girl with a dream. I was a woman making things happen. But still, there was a gnawing feeling at the back of my mind. My family's voices, their doubts, they lingered. It wasn't enough just to prove to myself that I could do it. I had to prove it to them. I had to show them that they were wrong, and not just to my father, my brothers, and my mother, but to everyone who had ever doubted me, everyone who had ever said no when I asked for a chance. And that thought, that drive, kept me going. It pushed me through the long nights, through the failures and the setbacks, because I wasn't doing this for me anymore. I was doing it for everyone who had ever told me I couldn't. And someday, they'd see. The early days of the business were a blur. Barely enough sleep, barely enough money, but always just enough hope to keep going. I rented the tiniest corner in a shared office space, squeezed between a wedding planner and a guy who sold eco-friendly dog treats. It smelled like lavender and peanut butter in there all the time, but it was mine. My space, my start. I remember sitting at that wobbly secondhand desk, building my first website on a borrowed laptop. My internet would cut out every time someone in the building microwaved something. It didn't matter. I kept going. I started with freelance projects, small ones no one else wanted, designing logos, writing bios, managing social media pages for local cafes. They weren't glamorous, but they paid just enough to cover rent and keep the lights on. Every client who paid their invoice was a small victory. Every return customer was a reminder that I was doing something right. But it wasn't just about staying afloat. I had a vision. I didn't want to scrape by forever. I wanted to build something real, something that could grow. So I reinvested everything. Every penny that didn't go to food or rent went back into the business. A better website, better tools, a proper business registration, small upgrades, brick by brick. I was obsessed, honestly. While my friends were out at parties or dating or going on weekend trips, I was in that office tweaking email copy and teaching myself how to run ads. I wasn't missing out. I was building up. Every no from a potential client, every ignored email or failed pitch, it all just fueled me. And then came the first big client. I remember the email. It popped up around midnight. A national brand. Someone had passed my name along. I thought it was spam at first. I read the email 3 times, my heart racing. They needed a full campaign, fast turnaround. It was more than I'd ever charged before, more than I thought anyone would pay me. I said yes. I didn't sleep for 3 days, working nonstop to deliver. And when they emailed back, thanking me and asking to set up a long-term contract, I cried. Proper tears. Ugly ones? That deal changed everything. It gave me breathing room. More importantly, it gave me confidence. I hired my first freelancer, then another. I moved into a better space. The work got bigger, the name recognition grew, and people started calling me instead of the other way around. But the fire didn't go out. If anything, it burned hotter. Because no matter how far I came, I never forgot where I started. That tiny kitchen, that night, my father's laugh, my brother's smug smirks, my mother's silence. I still wasn't there yet, not even close. But I was getting closer, and they had no idea what was coming. The first time I saw myself in a magazine, I nearly dropped my coffee. It was a feature in a small business journal, nothing huge. But there I was, sitting on a stool in the studio, grinning awkwardly next to the headline, "The Girl Who." Said no back. I hated the photo, my hair looked messy, and I was wearing the wrong shoes. But the words, the story, that was mine, and people were finally reading it. I showed it to no one. Not because I wasn't proud, but because I knew they'd see it too. My family. Small towns love gossip and word travels fast. If they hadn't heard already, they would soon. I imagined them around the kitchen table, passing the magazine around, pretending not to care. Or maybe my father would scoff again, say, "I just got lucky." Maybe my mother would look away, same as always. My brothers might laugh, make a joke, move on. That mental image used to cut like glass. But by now, I'd learned how to turn pain into momentum. I started showing up in rooms that once felt off limits. Boardrooms, panels, events with actual red carpets. I had to Google how to walk in heels without looking like I'd borrowed them. I still felt out of place sometimes, like a girl playing dress up in a world that didn't expect her to be there. But then I'd remember what I'd built, I wasn't there because someone gave me a seat. I made the damn chair myself. The business grew faster than I did. With every new hire, I felt the weight of being responsible for someone else's rent, their bills, their families. But it also made me stronger. I wasn't just hustling for me anymore. I was building something that gave others a shot too. People who didn't have connections or capital or the luxury of being taken seriously right away. The media started calling me self-made. I never liked the term. It made it sound like I did it all alone. Truth is, I had help. Mentors, clients who believed in me, strangers on the internet who rooted for me when I couldn't root for myself. But what I didn't have was the people who were supposed to believe in me first, and that still haunted me. One night, after another long workday, I caught my reflection in the mirror of my office, the kind of tired that sits in your bones. But behind the exhaustion was something else. Power. Not the flashy, ego-driven kind. The quiet, grounded kind. The kind that comes from surviving, rebuilding, and choosing not to give up, even when no one claps for you. I ran my fingers along the edge of the old photo. I kept pinned to the corkboard. That girl was still in me, still furious, still burning, but no longer invisible. I whispered to her sometimes, told her we made it, that it was okay to stop fighting everyone now. But she never really listened, because we both knew we weren't finished yet. The past didn't disappear just because I changed my postcode or signed bigger checks. It followed me in quiet ways, in the way I double-checked my work 10 times before submitting it, in how I still flinched when someone raised their voice, in how I worked twice as hard to prove I deserved every seat, every stage, every win. Success didn't silence the doubt. It just taught me how to speak louder than it. Around this time, I got an invitation to speak at a women's conference. Share your story, the email read. Inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs. The thought terrified me. Not the crowd or the lights, but the honesty. How much of the truth was I ready to tell? That I'd started with nothing but rage and a list of names I wanted to prove wrong. That I built a business because I didn't. Want to beg anyone else for a chance? That every win was laced with a small, sharp ache because the people I once loved never saw me? But I accepted the invite anyway. Standing on that stage, I felt my heart trying to escape my chest. The lights were too bright and my throat felt tight, but I took a deep breath and started with the only truth I knew. My father laughed when I said I wanted to start a business. I watched the room shift. Faces leaned forward. Some nodded, some held back tears. And I kept going. Not because I wasn't scared, but because I knew that girl in the photo, the one no one believed in, would have wanted me to speak. People started seeing me differently, not just as the woman behind the company, but as the woman behind the fire. I got messages from strangers, women who said my story lit something in them. I didn't know what to do with that kind of power at first. It was humbling, strange, heavy even, but it made me think. Maybe I hadn't just built a business to prove them wrong. Maybe deep down, I was trying to build a world where no one had to beg for belief the way I once did. Still, as the applause faded and the emails came in, the past stayed loud in my mind. I hadn't seen my family in over 7 years. Not since the day I walked out with nothing but my laptop, a cracked phone, and the same tenacity they tried to beat out of me with silence. Every year on my birthday, I half expected a call. Every New Year's Eve, I stared at my phone at midnight, wondering if maybe this time someone would reach out. They never did. So I stopped waiting. Until one morning, I got a text. A number I didn't recognize. Dad had a stroke. He's stable. Thought you should know. Just that. No name. No other words. I stared at the message for a long time. My fingers hovered over the screen, unsure what I was supposed to feel. Sadness? Guilt? Relief? Instead, all I felt was cold. A kind of numb that came from too many wounds left unattended. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Not then. But the past has a funny way of crawling back into your life, no matter how high you climb. That same week, something else happened, I was out with my assistant, Clara, checking out properties for a new development I was funding, an old neighborhood I used to walk through as a teen when I needed to clear my head. I liked the streets there, the trees, the way it smelled like memories. Clara scrolled through listings on her iPad and paused. "You won't believe this," she said, turning the screen to me. There it was, my childhood home, for sale. I stared at it, heart thudding like a war drum. The paint was different, but the shape was the same. The crooked porch, the upstairs window that used to leak during storms, the front door I slammed so many times, the walls that echoed with arguments, with silence, with shame. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I felt 12 again. Awkward, ignored, angry. "That's it," I whispered. "That's the house." Clara's eyes widened. "You want to see it?" "No," I said. But I was lying. Of course, I did. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning with memories I'd buried long ago. That house, it wasn't just wood and bricks. It was the place where I first learned the sound of dismissal, the chill of being underestimated. It was where dreams went to die quietly, under the weight of someone else's expectations. But something had changed in me. I wasn't that girl anymore. So the next morning, I called Clara. "Book the viewing," I said, my voice steady. She didn't ask questions, just replied, "Already done." The viewing was set for Friday, 2 days away. 2 days to prepare to walk back into a space that had rejected me. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to find. Closure, maybe, or some proof that the girl who once cried herself to sleep in that house had finally become someone worth listening to. When Friday came, I dressed carefully. Not flashy, but sharp. Tailored black blazer, silk blouse, pointed heels. I wanted to walk into that house and feel like every fiber of it remembered who I was and who I'd become. Clara picked me up in her car. The ride over was quiet, tense. "You okay?" she asked once, her voice soft. "Yeah," I lied. "Just memories." The neighborhood looked smaller than I remembered. The trees weren't as tall, the sidewalks cracked, but it was still familiar. Still home in that painful, uncomfortable way. And then there it was. The house. It hadn't changed much. New paint, a different mailbox. But the energy? That was the same. Heavy. Like the walls still carried the weight of things never said. The real estate agent met us at the front. Polished, polite, oblivious. She unlocked the door and let us in. And suddenly, I was 17 again, walking in with trembling hands, carrying a folder of business ideas I'd printed out at school. I could almost hear my father's laugh, see my mother glance away, feel my brother's smirks digging into my skin like pins. "This is the living room," the agent said, gesturing around. But I already knew. I knew every crack in the wall, every squeaky floorboard, every spot where my dreams had curled up and hidden. Clara took photos discreetly. I just stood there, breathing it in. I went room by room. The kitchen where my mom made tea and never asked how I was. The hallway where I overheard my dad call me too soft for business. My bedroom, still painted a pale pink, though the furniture was gone. When we got back downstairs, I turned to the agent. "I'll take it," I said. She blinked. "Don't you want to know the price?" "I don't care." She smiled, clearly thinking I was being dramatic. "We'll drop the paperwork. You'll love the place. It has such charm." I didn't answer. I wasn't buying it for charm. I was buying it for power. I was buying it for every time. They told me I couldn't. For every time they laughed, for every second I sat in this house and questioned my worth. Clara looked at me as we stepped back outside. "You sure you want this?" I looked up at the windows. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The paperwork didn't take long. Money talks, and when you have enough of it, the world tends to speed things up for you. Within a week, the house was mine. Mine. I stared at the signed documents in my office, fingers lightly tracing the ink as if I still didn't quite believe it. This place, this symbol of rejection, silence, and doubt, now belonged to me. And I wasn't done. See, buying the house was never about living in it. It was about reclaiming something that had been stolen from me. my voice, my power, my name. The next step was the harder one. I needed to face them. My parents still lived in the same house. My brothers had moved out years ago, one to the suburbs, the other across the country. But the core of it, the root of the silence, the source of the laughter that still lived and breathed inside those walls, I thought I'd be shaking when I walked back up those steps, but I wasn't. I knocked once. Firm. No hesitation. My mother opened the door. She looked older, smaller. Her hair had thinned and her eyes were weary, like life had been chewing at her slowly. When she saw me, her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. "Mum," I said. She stepped back without speaking. The hallway looked exactly the same. Same coat rack, same faded photo of our family smiling stiffly on the beach that one summer my dad actually agreed to a holiday. Same smell of old furniture and stale quiet. My father was in the living room, seated in his usual armchair like nothing had changed since I was 17. When he saw me, his eyebrows lifted. "Well," he said, as if I were a guest. "Didn't expect to see you here." I handed him the envelope. He didn't take it at first, just looked at me with that same dismissive smirk that used to make me feel like I was 3 inches tall. "What's this?" "Eviction notice," I said. Calm. Even. His face darkened. "Excuse me?" "I bought the house. It's mine now. You have 30 days to leave." The room went silent. My mother sat down on the edge of the sofa. Her hands trembled in her lap. "You're joking," he said. I didn't flinch. "I'm not." "You'd throw your own family out of their home?" I stepped closer. "You laughed when I asked for a loan to start my business. You told me that's not what girls do. Do you remember that?" He stared at me, said nothing. "You taught me something that day, that no one was going to hand me a damn thing, that if I wanted it, I'd have to take it. So I did." "Isabel," my mother began, voice cracking. I looked at her. For the first time, she met my eyes, and I saw it. Guilt, regret, and maybe, somewhere deep inside, pride. "I gave you silence," she whispered. "I'm sorry." I nodded once. "I know." My father stood up. "This is petty, vindictive." "No," I said, stepping back. "This is closure." I turned and walked toward the door. My heels clicked against the wooden floor with every step, echoing louder than anything they'd ever said to support me. As I opened the front door, I paused. "You were right," I said over my shoulder. "This isn't what girls do." I looked at him, cold, calm, unshaken. But I'm not just any girl anymore. And then I left. The day after I served the eviction notice, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. I sat in my penthouse apartment, staring out at the skyline I'd once dreamed of, my coffee going cold in my hands. I had spent years building my life from the ground up, scraping by, failing, learning, building again. I thought this moment would feel like some kind of victory, but it didn't. Because closure isn't neat. It doesn't come with fireworks or applause. It just comes, and then it sits beside you like an old friend who doesn't speak much. I replayed the scene from the day before 100 times. The way my mother looked at me, the way my father refused to believe I could possibly have this much power, like he still saw me as the girl begging for permission. I wasn't that girl anymore, but something in me had hoped they'd see that too. A knock came at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it to find my brother, Mark, standing there, same smug face, same arms crossed like he was the older, wiser one, even though he was only older by minutes. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stepped aside. He walked in like he owned the place, still that same attitude, even after everything. "You've made quite a statement," he said, taking in the place. "Didn't come here to compliment the decor, did you?" He smirked. "No, I came to ask what the hell you're doing." I raised an eyebrow. "Pretty obvious, don't you think?" "You bought the house just to throw Mom and Dad out?" I folded my arms. They told me I couldn't do it. That girls don't build things, that I was foolish to try. They laughed at me, Mark. You did too. His face twitched slightly. We didn't think you'd actually go. You didn't want me to go? He didn't answer. I walked over to the windows, looked out at the city again. I didn't do this out of spite. I did it because I needed to prove to myself and to them that I could, that I did. Mark sat down. His bravado faded for a moment. They were wrong. I know that now, but this, kicking them out? I turned. I'm not asking for your approval. He sighed. You were always the strongest of us. We just didn't see it. I blinked, surprised by the softness in his voice. Dad's stubborn, he continued. He'll never say it, but yesterday, that look in his eyes wasn't just anger, it was fear, because for the first time in his life, he realized you didn't need him. You never did. Silence fell between us. He stood. You do what you need to do, but don't forget who you are. You've built an empire. Don't burn it just to watch the ashes. After he left, I sat back down. His words echoed, don't burn it just to watch the ashes. Maybe he had a point. Maybe I didn't need to watch them suffer to feel whole again. But maybe, just maybe, they needed to feel the weight of what they'd tried to bury. The fire in me hadn't burned out. It had evolved. It wasn't just rage anymore. It was power. It was knowing I could change the story. And I wasn't done writing it. Trick stop. Morning, I found myself driving back to the neighborhood I'd once escaped. I hadn't planned to. Honestly, I didn't even remember getting in the car. It was like my body knew where to go before my mind caught up. The street hadn't changed much. Same cracked pavements, same rusted fences, and peeling paint. But the way I saw it had changed completely. I used to see this place as a cage. Now, it was a backdrop, a set I had outgrown. The house stood at the end of the street like a monument to everything I had endured. I parked across the road and just sat there for a moment, watching, waiting. A kid rode by on a rusty bike, one sneaker dragging the ground. His eyes caught mine, and he gave me a quick nod. I nodded back. That used to be me, hungry, restless, and ready to fight the world. I didn't come here to cause a scene. I came because there was something I needed to feel, something I hadn't allowed myself to sit with. Grief. Grief for the girl I used to be. For the years I spent proving I was worth listening to. For the mother who never spoke up. For the father who only knew how to show strength by controlling others. And for the home that never felt like home. I got out of the car and walked to the front gate. It squeaked just like it always had. The garden was still overgrown, and the paint on the porch steps was still chipped. Nothing had changed. Except me. I knocked. Mom answered the door. Her face was pale, her hair tied back like it always was when she was anxious. She didn't speak, just opened the door wider. I stepped inside. The scent hit me first. That same faint mix of dust, floor polish, and old memories. It rushed me all at once. She led me to the kitchen. Dad was at the table reading the newspaper like it was any other day, like his daughter hadn't just handed him eviction papers less than 48 hours ago. He looked up. His jaw clenched. Changed. Your mind? No. Silence. Mum stood by the sink, back turned, as if becoming part of the wallpaper would make it all disappear. I didn't come here to argue, I said. I just came to say something. He folded the paper. Go on. I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it because I had to. I've spent years carrying your voices in my head, telling me I'd fail, that I wasn't enough, that being a girl meant I had limits. You do have limits, he snapped. I smiled, bitter. Then it's a good thing I stopped listening to you. He stood, the chair scraping behind him. So this is revenge? No, this is reality. You told me I couldn't. So I did. And now you have to live with that. He looked away. Mum still hadn't turned around. I wish you'd defended me, I said, directing it to her back. Just once. Even quietly. "I did," she whispered. "You just didn't see it." Then, "Why didn't you stop him?" "I couldn't," she said. "You don't understand what it's like?" "I do. That's why I left." I stepped back, suddenly tired. "You'll need to be out by the end of the month. I'll send a moving company to help. You won't owe anything. I'm not cruel." Dad scoffed. "No, just heartless." I met his eyes. "No, I have a heart. I just stopped offering it to people who never wanted it." And with that, I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I just walked to my car, sat behind the wheel, and exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for years. Sometimes power doesn't come from raising your voice. Sometimes it comes from choosing to walk away. I didn't go straight home after that. I drove for hours, windows down, music loud, letting the wind tear through my hair like it could carry away the weight I'd been dragging behind me. There's a strange kind of freedom in letting go of, a place that never truly held you, but the freedom didn't come easy. I pulled off onto a cliffside road. I used to visit when I was younger, back when I needed to feel like the world was bigger than my problems. The ocean crashed below, endless and loud and unapologetic. I parked and sat on the hood of my car, staring out at the horizon, wondering how the hell I got here. Self-made, that's what they call it. But it's a lie, isn't it? No one makes themselves. You're shaped by every crack and fracture, every no, every silence, every time someone doubted you and you got up anyway. E.T. thought about the people who helped me along the way. The ones who saw something in me when I was barely more than a girl with fire and fury and no roadmap. My first mentor. The woman who gave me a job when no one else would. The barista who let me sit for hours, rewriting business plans over cold coffee. The friend who told me, "You don't have to shrink to be loved." I owed pieces of my success to all of them. But I'd earned it too. Every sleepless night, every door slammed in my face. Every time I had to fake confidence until it stopped feeling like a lie. My phone buzzed, a message from my assistant. "Property acquisition complete. Legal paperwork finalized. They've received official notice." It was done. I stared at the message for a long time before locking my phone. I should have felt triumphant, but all I felt was empty. Not in a bad way. More like cleared out. Like something had been excavated from deep inside me. Revenge was never the goal. It just turned out to be the path. I slid off the hood and got back into the car, drove toward the city with the kind of calm that only comes after a storm. Back at my flat, I took the long way up, stairs instead of the lift. I wanted to feel my legs burn, wanted to remind myself I still had miles left in me. When I walked through my front door, I saw the life I'd built with fresh eyes. Clean, elegant space. Walls lined with art I loved. Shelves filled with books and awards. It didn't scream wealth. It whispered peace. I dropped my keys on the table, kicked off my shoes, and stood in the middle of the living room just breathing. Then I walked to my desk, opened my laptop, and started to write. Not business notes, not emails. A letter. To Ys, the girl I used to be. The one who sat in her childhood bedroom, dreams bigger than the house could hold, being told she was too much, too loud, too ambitious. I told her she was right to leave, that she was brave, that she wasn't crazy, that everything she built came from believing in herself when no one else did. I ended the letter with a single line. You don't owe them anything, but you owe yourself everything. I didn't mail the letter. I folded it carefully and tucked it into the back of my journal, right between old notes and sketches of logos that never made it past the dream phase. It didn't need to go anywhere. It already had. It lived in me now. The next morning, I woke up with a kind of stillness I hadn't felt in years. Not calm, exactly. More like clarity. The kind that comes when you finally stop waiting for someone else to approve the life you're building. I showered, got dressed, and made my way to the office. My company didn't run itself, not yet anyway. But I had built a solid team. People who shared the vision, who cared just as deeply as I did about what we were creating. It was more than just business. It was a movement. The elevator doors opened to our top floor, and I was greeted with a chorus of "Morning, Isabel," and the soft hum of a place alive with purpose. I sat in my corner office, floor-to-ceiling windows, clean lines, warmth, in every detail, and opened my calendar. My assistant had highlighted the afternoon. Site visit. Family property. The house. The childhood home that was now legally mine. I leaned back in my chair and stared out at the skyline. I thought about calling it off, sending someone else, pretending I was too busy. But I wasn't. And I didn't want to hide. I needed to go, not because I wanted another confrontation, but because I needed to see it through. I spent the morning in meetings, answering questions, giving approvals. Everything felt normal, even as my mind kept drifting back to that house. That hallway where I used to trace the grooves in the wallpaper with my fingers. The backyard where I'd sit under the tree and write stories I was too afraid to share. Time passed quickly, too quickly. Before I knew it, I was back in the car, heading toward the place that shaped me and broke me all at once. As I turned onto the old street, something tightened in my chest. The houses were mostly the same. A few new coats of paint, a couple of hedges trimmed back, but the feeling was unchanged. I parked in front of the house. My house. It still looked the same. Same faded bricks, same porch light hanging slightly crooked, same squeaky gate. I stepped out of the car and walked up the path slowly, like I was walking through a memory I wasn't sure I wanted to disturb. Before I even reached the steps, the front door opened. My mother stood there. I hadn't expected her. I'd assumed they would have left already, or at least that someone else would have handled the paperwork. But there she was, looking older than I remembered. Smaller, somehow. But her eyes, the same deep-set gaze that once looked past me, met mine without flinching. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, she said, "You came." I nodded. "I needed to." She stepped aside. "Come in." I hesitated, but only for a second. Then I walked past her and into the house that once told me I wasn't enough. It smelled the same. Dust and old wood. A hint of cinnamon from the kitchen, like the ghost of a holiday that never really belonged to me. Everything was familiar and wrong at the same time. My footsteps echoed as I moved through the hall. I paused in the living room, the same place where my father laughed when I told him my plans, the same place where my brothers smirked, the same place my mother stayed quiet. She stood behind me, watching. I turned to her. "I'm not here to argue," I said. "I know. I'm not here for revenge either." "I know that too." We stood there in the quiet, the weight of unsaid years pressing down. I just needed to see it one more time before it changes. Her lips pressed together like she was holding back words. Maybe regret, maybe nothing. "I always knew you were different," she said softly. "You didn't say that then." I was scared. I was too. We stood in silence again, but this time, it didn't feel as heavy. "I'll leave you alone now," she said, walking back toward the door. And just like that, I was alone in the house I'd finally taken back. I took a deep breath and walked into the kitchen. It looked almost untouched, like time had decided to slow down here. The old wooden table, the cracked mugs on the counter, the chair I used to sit in every morning with my mother. I could still see the way she'd always made sure I had the biggest slice of toast, as though it was some kind of unspoken rule. I ran my fingers along the edge of the table. It felt cold now. The warmth had been drained out of this place long ago. I stood there for a few moments, lost in the memory of it all. In the memory of her. But that wasn't why I was here. The house was mine now. I had every right to be here. I turned back toward the hallway. The house felt bigger now, emptier, as if it had been waiting for me to come back. And now that I had, it was all too much to hold. I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't need to turn around to know it was her. "You didn't have to do this," she said softly. I paused, looking down at the floor. Maybe not, but I needed to. There was a long silence, one that hung in the air like a heavy fog before she spoke again. "I wanted to believe in you, Isabel. I wanted to." "I know." "I didn't know how." I turned to face her then. Her face looked older than I remembered, but her eyes, they were the same eyes. Eyes that held things they never said. "You didn't have to know how," I said quietly. "You just had to trust me." Her gaze dropped to the floor. She didn't answer me. I could feel the sting of that old hurt rising again, but I kept it in check. There was no point in pushing it, no point in reopening wounds that had already scarred over. "I'm not asking for your approval anymore, Mom," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not even asking for your understanding. I'm just telling you, this is where I am now. This is what I've made of myself." "I know," she whispered. I nodded. "I'll send the papers tomorrow." She didn't speak again, but I could see her shoulders sag, as though some weight had been lifted, though she hadn't realized it. I walked past her, back toward the front door. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. As I stepped onto the porch, I paused for a moment, taking in the view of the street. It had been my world once, a small world, a world where I felt trapped by expectations I hadn't chosen. But now, it was just a place, a house, a memory. I felt the weight of the eviction papers in my pocket, but there was no joy in holding them anymore, no satisfaction, just a strange peace that came from finally closing that door. I was leaving now, but I wasn't running. Not anymore. I climbed back into my car, feeling a deep, steady calm settle over me. I was done with the past. It had shaped me, yes, but it no longer had the power to define me. I wasn't going back there anymore. The road ahead was mine to make, and I had no intention of stopping. I woke up the next morning to the sound of my phone ringing. It wasn't a surprise. I had expected calls like this. It was only a matter of time before the media started sniffing around. After all, a self-made millionaire buying her childhood, home, and evicting her family, it was a story too juicy to ignore. I glanced at the clock. It was still early, too early for anyone important to be calling. But I picked it up anyway. "Hello?" I said, my voice still thick with sleep. "Isabel, it's Alex," came the voice on the other end. Alex was one of my investors, a sharp mind who'd been with me since the beginning. "I need to talk to you. It's about the house." I sat up, suddenly awake. "What about it?" "There's already a lot of noise. The press is already picking up on it, and I've been getting calls from some of your competitors. They're trying to twist this into something negative, Isabel. You know how they do." I took a slow breath, letting the weight of his words sink in. I wasn't surprised. The world always looked for an angle, a way to tear someone down. It had been my reality from the moment I stepped into the business world. They were always waiting for a mistake, always waiting for someone like me to fall. "I know," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I've seen the headlines." "I'm not sure this is the kind of attention you want right now, Isabel," Alex continued. "People are going to see this as vindictive, as personal. I'm not saying it's wrong, but I don't care how they see it," I interrupted, my tone firm. "This is personal. It's always been personal, and they can think whatever they want. It's not going to change a thing." There was a long pause on the other end. "Okay," Alex said finally. "Just make sure you're prepared for the backlash. You know it's coming." "I'm ready," I replied, my voice steady. "I've been ready for years." After hanging up, I sat there for a moment, looking out of the window at the sprawling city below. It was still early, but the streets were already alive with movement, with the quiet hum of industry. The world was waking up, and I was a part of it now. I had no intention of backing down. The calls, the headlines, the judgment, none of it mattered. It was just noise. The same noise that had followed me for years, telling me what I could or couldn't do, what I should or shouldn't want. And now, for the first time in my life, I was in a position to silence it. The day stretched ahead of me like a blank canvas, waiting for me to make my mark. There was still work to do. There were always deals to close, meetings to attend, new ideas to implement. But today, there was something different in the air. A shift? A moment of reflection. It was time to build something new from the ground up. Time to redefine what it meant to be a woman in a man's world. I didn't need permission. I didn't need validation. I had what I needed, fire in my chest and a future ahead of me. The past could stay where it belonged, buried. The future? That was mine for the taking. The next few days were a blur of meetings and phone calls. The media storm had picked up pace, just as I expected. Headlines painted me as ruthless, vindictive, and petty. I knew they had to twist the story to make it sell, but none of it mattered. I wasn't going to let their opinions shape my reality. I'd long since stopped caring about the noise. What mattered was the work. What mattered was the empire I had built, piece by piece. I wasn't going to let my family's opinion, or anyone else's, dictate what I could or couldn't do. I had proved that when I started this journey, and I wasn't going to stop now. But there was one call I couldn't ignore. It came in the form of an email from my mother, a simple subject line: "We need to talk." I stared at it for a moment before opening it. My mother had always been the quiet one, the one who never said much, but always seemed to know what was going on. I never knew where she stood in all of this, but I had a feeling this email was going to tell me. "Isabel, I've been thinking about everything that's happened, and I need you to understand something. I don't agree with what your father said to you, but he's stubborn, and when he makes up his mind about something, it's hard to change it. That's just who he is. I never wanted you to feel like you weren't enough, like you couldn't do something just because you were a girl. I know that now, but I'm also not sure I fully understand what you're doing. You've always been a fighter, but this feels like you're trying to prove something to everyone, even to us. I'm not sure what you're trying to prove anymore. I hope you don't think I'm judging you. I just want you to know that I'm here if you want to talk. I'm your mother, and I'll always be here no matter what. Love, Mama B." I stared at the email for longer than I should have. My mother had never been one to express much emotion, so to get a message like this was both comforting and unsettling. It was clear that she didn't understand my decision, but at the same time, she was offering an olive branch. She was reaching out. I thought about replying immediately, but I couldn't. Not yet. I wasn't sure what to say. What could I say to someone who didn't understand why I had done what I did? How could I explain something that was so deeply personal? The truth was, I didn't owe anyone an explanation, especially not to people who had never believed in me. But the fact that my mother had reached out, her way of offering an apology without saying the words, made me pause. She might not get it now, but I knew she cared in her own way. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, letting out a long breath. The silence in my office was overwhelming, but I didn't mind it. It gave me space to think, to plan, to breathe. In this moment, I was alone with my thoughts, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to feel the weight of everything I had accomplished. It wasn't just the house, or the money, or the success. It was the fact that I had done it all on my own. That was the part that mattered most. The phone rang again, breaking my train of thought. I picked it up without looking at the screen, already knowing who it was. "Isabel?" Alex's voice came through the line. "We've got a problem." I rolled my eyes, but I was already bracing myself for whatever it was. "What now?" "There's a petition going around. People are angry about what you did with the house, and they're saying it's a public matter now. They want to force you to sell it back to the family." I felt my pulse quicken. They can't do that. I know, but it's getting traction. You're going to have to deal with this soon. The longer you wait, the worse it's going to get. "Fine," I said, rubbing my temples. "Let's handle it. What's the next step?" Alex hesitated. "I'll get our legal team on it, but you need to be prepared for some pushback. This isn't just going to go away." I took a deep breath, swallowing the anger rising in my chest. I didn't come this far just to back down now. We'll handle it. I hung up the phone and stood up, pacing around my office. Another challenge, another obstacle. But I wasn't going to let it break me. They wanted me to fold, to apologize, to give in. But that wasn't going to happen. I had started this journey for a reason, to prove that I was more than what they said I was, that I was capable of far more than anyone ever thought. And now, it was time to show them just how much. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of messages, some from the media, others from people I barely knew. The pressure was mounting. There was no avoiding it anymore. I hadn't expected things to quiet down after I bought the house. In fact, I knew the opposite would happen. But the amount of attention it was getting was both overwhelming and invigorating. For every person who scolded me, there was another who applauded my boldness. Some were calling me a hero, others a villain. It didn't matter. None of it did. What mattered was how I handled it, how I moved forward. I dressed quickly, pulling on a blazer that had seen me through more high-stakes meetings than I could count. It was my armor, my shield. I stood in front of the mirror and fixed my hair, straightened my posture. My reflection looked back at me, unflinching, strong. Today, I would make it clear that no one, least of all my family, was going to take away what I had built. I grabbed my phone and dialed Alex's number. We need to talk strategy, now. He answered almost immediately. I'm on my way to the office. I'll meet you there in 20. I hung up and sat down at my desk. The stillness of the room felt suffocating, but I refused to let it affect me. I was no longer the girl who asked for a loan, the one who had to beg for a chance. I was the one in control now. Alex arrived as promised a short while later. He stepped into the office, his face serious as always. I could tell he had already done his research on the petition. There was no time for small talk. We need a counter-narrative, he began. Something that hits back at the idea that this was a petty, spiteful move. We've got to reframe the story. I leaned back in my chair, considering his words. What do you suggest? I've already drafted a press release, Alex said, pulling up a document on his tablet. It emphasizes that you're not doing this for revenge, but to stand up for the principles you believe in, to show women, especially women from backgrounds like yours, that it's possible to succeed against the odds. I scanned through the release. It was solid. It focused on empowerment and defiance, but it needed something more, something to make it personal, something to make it undeniable. This is good, I said, nodding slowly. But we need a personal touch, a story, something that resonates. We don't just want to tell them what we did, we want to make them feel it. Alex raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. Like what? I thought for a moment. Tell the story of when I asked my father for help. That moment of rejection, the doubt. Then show how far I've come. Let them see the years of work and sacrifice. Let them see the fire that was lit in me that day. I paused, watching him digest my words. He tapped a few notes into his tablet. I think we can make that work. You want to include the part about your brothers? He asked. No, I said firmly. This isn't about them. This is about me. About proving to everyone who doubted, me, who thought I couldn't do it, that I did, that I can. Alex nodded, a flicker of approval in his eyes. All right, I'll revise it and send it out as soon as possible. We should have something ready by the end of the day. I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out over the city. It felt like the world was watching me, waiting for me to make my next move. This wasn't just a fight for my business. It was a fight for everything I had ever wanted, for every woman who had been told no, for every person who had been underestimated. I wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not ever. Good, I said, turning back to face Alex. Let's make sure they hear our side, and make sure they remember it. He gave a slight smile, his confidence matching mine. I'll get on it. As he walked out of the room, I allowed myself a moment of calm. The storm had only just begun, but I was ready. I had to be. This was my moment, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. The press release was just the beginning. The real challenge was going to be facing my family, the ones who had once told me I was foolish, that I would never amount to anything. They hadn't seen me as capable, but I'd show them now. I would make sure they saw the woman I had become and the strength that came with it. The day after Alex sent out the press release, the media frenzy kicked into full gear. News outlets were covering it from every angle. Some outlets were still questioning my motives, while others were calling me a beacon of strength. Regardless of the tone, the fact remained that everyone was talking about me. But it wasn't enough. I didn't want just the world to see me. I wanted my family to know who I had become, to understand that their dismissal of my dreams had only pushed me further. The old house, the one that had once been a symbol of my family's refusal to believe in me, was no longer just a house. It had become a symbol of everything I had fought for, and soon it would be mine. It wasn't just a personal win, it was a declaration of my independence, a declaration of everything I had achieved on my own. As I sat at my desk, staring at the photos of the house on my screen, I thought about the years that had passed, how many sleepless nights I had endured, how many obstacles I'd overcome. There was a fire in me that had never gone out, and now it was time to reignite it, to show my family how wrong they had been. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. It was my mother. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to approach the conversation, but I answered. "Hello, Mum," I said, keeping my tone neutral. Her voice was soft but strained. "Isabel?" I saw the article. I just wanted to know why. Why now? I wasn't surprised that she had called. I knew she'd be concerned. But I also knew that her silence during all those years had spoken volumes. She hadn't spoken up when my father dismissed my dreams. She hadn't stood beside me when I needed her most. "I did it because I can," I said calmly. "I did it because I deserve to. I've worked for everything I have, and I'm not going to let anyone, least of all you and Dad, tell me I don't have the right to own this house. This is my life now, my success, my decision." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment I thought she might hang up, but she didn't. "I'm not trying to hurt you," she said quietly. "I just want you to know that I never wanted you to feel like you weren't good enough. You are. You always were." Her words were a soft balm to the sharp edge of my anger, but it didn't change what had happened. It didn't change the fact that they had abandoned me when I needed them the most. It didn't change the fact that I had been told no over and over again until I made it clear that I wasn't going to let anyone define me. "I know, Mum," I replied, "but it's too late for apologies. I've already made my choices, and they're mine alone." The silence hung in the air for a moment longer before she finally spoke again, her voice quieter than before. "I just want you to be happy. Isabel, that's all?" I almost laughed. How could she think that buying the house was about anything other than proving to myself that I was worthy, that I was capable, that I had the power to succeed no matter what they said? "I am," I said firmly, "and I'm going to show everyone that." With that, I ended the call. A wave of exhaustion washed over me, but beneath it, there was a sense of determination. I knew that I had made the right decision. Now, it was time to take the next step. I was going to confront my father, my brothers. I was going to show them who I had become and that they had been wrong about me. I wasn't just any girl anymore. I was a force to be reckoned with. I stood up from my desk, feeling the weight of everything I had accomplished and everything that was yet to come. This was my fight, and it wasn't over. The day had finally come. The house, the symbol of my past, was now mine. I stood outside it, staring at the familiar walls that had once trapped me, the place where my dreams were mocked, where my worth was questioned. But not anymore. This was a moment I had imagined in my head for years, walking back into this house not as the girl who had been dismissed, but as the woman who had earned everything she had, as the woman who had proven them all wrong. I rang the doorbell, my heart beating louder than I cared to admit. There was something surreal about being here now. I wasn't the same person I had been when I left, but standing on the doorstep of this house, I still felt the weight of their words hanging in the air. My father answered. He looked at me, his face betraying no emotion. It was as if he hadn't even thought I would come back. Maybe he had assumed that I would never reach this point. that his dismissal of me had worked. For a moment, we just stared at each other. The silence between us was thick, suffocating. I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Maybe regret, maybe surprise. But whatever it was, I wasn't going to let it stop me. He cleared his throat. "What are you doing here, Isabel?" I stood tall, my voice steady, cold. "I came to give you something." His brow furrowed, confusion written all over his face. "What is it?" I handed him the eviction papers. He stared at them, and, for the first time in years, his composure cracked. His mouth opened, but no words came out. His face twisted in disbelief, and I saw a shadow of panic. He started, but I cut him off. "Yes, Dad, I bought the house. I'm evicting you." His eyes widened. The familiar anger I had always known rose in him, but it was tempered with something else now. His age, his pride, the knowledge that I had succeeded when he said I never would. It all played out on his face. He had no retort, no argument. He had nothing. "This isn't..." He stopped himself, the words failing him. "You really did it. You bought this house." I nodded. "Yes, I did." There was another silence, but this time it was different. It wasn't the silence of rejection or mockery. This was the silence of understanding, of recognition. He knew in that moment that I had become something far beyond what he could ever have imagined. "You were right, Dad," I said, my voice icy, but not without purpose. "This isn't what girls do, but I'm not just any girl anymore." The words cut through the air like a blade. They were sharp and final. I wasn't the girl who had asked for a loan, who had been laughed at and told she couldn't. I was the woman who had proven herself. I was the one who had taken everything they had said and turned it into fuel for my fire. He took a step back, his gaze still fixed on the papers. "You really are something else," he said quietly. His voice was almost a whisper, like a concession. "Damn right," I replied, not backing down for a second. "Now, I think you've overstayed your welcome." He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. The look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. He was broken, and I didn't care. This wasn't about him. It was about me. And I wasn't going to let anyone, not even him, take that away from me. As I turned to walk away, I could feel the weight of the house behind me. Not the physical weight, but the weight of everything I had overcome to get to this moment. This was mine now, and nothing, no one, could take that from me. As I drove away from the house, I felt lighter. There was no joy in what I had done, no satisfaction in their defeat. It was simply the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. I had spent years trying to prove myself, and now, finally, I could move forward. No more looking back, no more wondering if I was enough. I knew who I was now, and no one could take that away from me. I had won, and I was ready for whatever came next. The road ahead was no longer clouded with doubt or uncertainty. For so long, I had been defined by others' perceptions of me, by the limits they tried to impose on what I could achieve. But now I was the one writing my own story. And it wasn't just about the house or the money or the business I had built. It was about everything I had become in the process. I wasn't looking for revenge. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. The truth was, I had always known what I was capable of. It had been in me all along, but I had been waiting for the moment when I could finally stand tall and say, I did it. That moment had come, and it had come because I refused to let their doubt shape my future. I refused to let their small-mindedness define who I was. I looked out the window of the car as the familiar scenery blurred past me. It was strange being back in this place, seeing everything with new eyes. Everything was the same, yet it felt different. The streets, the buildings, even the air seemed to have changed. I wasn't the same person anymore. I had outgrown this town, these people. I wasn't running from anything anymore. I was walking into a future that was mine to create, and I was doing it on my terms. The people who had once laughed at me, who had told me I was nothing, well, they didn't matter. Not anymore. What mattered now was what I could achieve moving forward. And as I made my way back to the city, to my office, to my empire, I knew that this was just the beginning. This was only one chapter of a much larger story. I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. As I walked into my office, I felt the familiar hum of power, of control, of being in charge of my own destiny. The place was buzzing with activity, but it didn't feel overwhelming anymore. It felt like home. I had built this. I had made this happen. And every person who walked in here, every deal I made, every decision I took, it was all a reflection of the journey I had walked to get here. I wasn't just a girl who asked for a loan anymore. I was a woman who had become everything they had said I couldn't be. And that was the most powerful thing of all. I sat at my desk, the weight of the papers and contracts in front of me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't seeking validation from anyone. I had done this for me. I had done it because I believed in myself when no one else did. The phone rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. I picked it up without hesitation. Yes? Isabel, it's me, came the voice on the other end, my brother. I didn't say anything right away. I had been expecting this. I had been waiting for it. The call, the apology. It was inevitable. I saw the news, he said, his voice quieter than I had ever heard it. The house. You really did it. I let the silence hang there for a moment, weighing my response. This was the moment I had been waiting for, wasn't it? The chance to have the final word. The chance to let him know how far I had come. Yeah, I said calmly. I really did. I didn't... He paused, clearly struggling with what to say. I didn't think you would. I thought... You thought I'd fail? I finished. For him. There was a long pause. Yeah, I guess I did. I could hear the shame in his voice, and honestly, it didn't feel as good as I thought it would. Because the truth was, I didn't need his apology. I didn't need him to acknowledge. Me, I had already done that for myself. Well, I didn't, I said, my voice steady. And that's what matters. I know, he replied quietly. I know. I wanted to say I'm sorry for what we said, for how we treated you. He could tell it wasn't easy for him. It was never easy to admit you were wrong, but I had done what I needed to do, and that was enough for me. I know you're sorry, I said, leaning back in my chair, but don't worry about it. I'm not the girl you remember anymore. There was a long silence. You're not, he said softly. You're not. I smiled to myself. Maybe in the end, that was all the closure I needed, because I wasn't that girl. I had evolved. I had fought for everything I had, and I had won. And that was something no one could ever take from me. The phone call ended, and I sat in silence for a moment longer, letting the weight of everything settle in. This was my victory. This was my story. And it was only just beginning.